When you're on a photography journey like the one I'm on here, you spend quite a lot of time in the car, so you start to think about all sorts of different things. And I got to think about that there's quite a lot of misunderstandings in landscape photography, quite a lot of myths. So in this video I will focus on debunking 7 different myths that I hear from time to time. This place is just amazing. You wouldn't think that a place like this existed in Denmark. The sky just goes kaboom! The first 3 episodes of this series were filmed and photographed in the northern part of Denmark on the peninsula of Jutland in a region called Vendsyssel. We are now moving southwest towards the largest fjord in Denmark, the Limfjord, and the beautiful region of Thy. Due to work and other obligations, Sophie couldn't join for this and the next few videos in this series. The first location I wanted to visit into is inspired by another Danish photographer, Christian Faber, whom I'd highly recommend you to follow on Instagram. Along the shores of the Limfjord you will find plenty of small boats, and this is one of them. So I've come down to this absolutely gorgeous scene, and yeah, very still, very calm, some morning mist over the fjord, sunrise, so idyllic. But it is also a good place to talk about my first myth busting in landscape photography. You've probably at some point heard the phrase, you want to photograph in manual to have full control over your camera. Now, digital cameras by themselves does not suddenly jump to plus or minus 1 or 2 stops of light. That's not how they work. There is a light meter within modern cameras, and it is that light meter that decides if you are in any of the auto modes, well, anything but manual mode, what your exposure settings should be to get a proper exposure. So if you have already decided on an exposure of 0, so you don't over or underexpose by 1 or 2 or 3 stops, then it's the light meter that gives you the information that tells you what exposure settings you should use, or what settings you should use for exposure. So you have the shutter speed and you have the aperture, and then you have the ISO that you can turn the brightness up and down with. But it's the shutter speed and the aperture that decides your exposure. And of course, if you are shooting with 1/100th of a second at f11 and you want a bigger depth of field, so you want to make the aperture smaller, then you of course have to compensate by choosing a slower shutter speed. And in that way, you keep the balance around that specific neutral exposure. Whether you do this in manual mode or you do this in aperture, where it's the camera that changes the shutter speed for you, doesn't matter whatsoever. The result is the same. And as I said, the camera won't just suddenly jump 1 or 2 stops and give you a completely wrong exposure. That's not how it works. Arguably, it is easier and you have more control over the exposure you want if you're using some of the auto settings. So a thing I forgot to mention is that think of the analogy that a camera is like a Swiss Army knife. You have a lot of different modes, a lot of different tools that you can use for a lot of different scenarios. And for the most part, when it comes to landscape photography, aperture priority and manual delivers the same results. It's usually just a question about what dials that you turn on the camera. So yeah, it is a little bit potato. This specific location is close to a huge bird sanctuary called Vejlerne. Vejlerne covers an area of about 24 square kilometers, which was originally below sea level. It contains Denmark's biggest forests of reeds, as well as some of the largest salt meadows in the country. Here we find Denmark's largest population of breeding grey lag geese, as well as marsh harrier, bittern, black-tern, crane, white-tailed eagle and peregrine falcon. This area is also one of the few otter habitats in the country. Vejlerne is a beloved area for bird enthusiasts, bird photographers, wildlife photographers and nature photographers in general. So another myth, I would say, that probably all photographers know, but I hear it from non-photographers, is that photographers and landscape photographers, they only experience the world through the lens. Yes, it's true, as a photographer we learn to see the world in a different way, but we definitely do not just see the world through the lens. I have been here for a little bit more than an hour now throughout the sunrise, and I have seen the birds come and go. I have seen the herons stand and fish. I have seen how the fog has moved in and moved out again. I have seen the colors change throughout the sunrise, and I have simply just had such an absolutely fantastic morning, and I've got a lot of beautiful photos, but I have definitely also been able to just enjoy the scene as the sun rose. And besides just being in the landscape and taking in all the information that we see and just enjoying nature, we are also constantly making aesthetic judgments about the scene. We are constantly trying to predict what will happen within the next 5 minutes so that we can make a good decision about getting the good photo. So we are not just looking at the world through the lens. We are really observing it, and we are really taking in all the information in front of us. The photos I got this morning completely fulfilled what I came for. I absolutely love them. They're minimalist and instills a kind of nostalgic calmness in me. I also think I managed to capture that special morning and sunrise vibe I felt on location. Close to Vejlerne but further west along the North Sea in the region of Thy, you will find Thy National Park. The dune and heath landscape of Thy was officially selected on June 29, 2007 to be the first national park in mainland Denmark. The landscape comprises windy coasts and dune systems, either bare, covered by heaths, meadows or plantation with a great number of conifers. Low nutrient wet hollows also occur, and between this varied coastal landscape small ponds and lakes can be found. Some areas of Thy National Park is also a wildlife reserve, so definitely another reason for wildlife photographers to visit this part of Denmark. As the area is known for being huge, wide and has lots of open air, it also comes with certain challenges for landscape photographers. Finding points of interest in the landscapes to use as focal points is not that easy. I went to a small fishing settlement called Stenbjerg. From here you have a great view over a small part of the dune area. I say a small part because the rest of the national park is beyond the horizon. I went here on a calm morning and hoped for some fog among the dunes, but it never really manifested. Instead I decided to get closer to the sea mark and photograph that. As I mentioned in the first episode of Photographing Denmark, these sea marks are quite iconic along the coastline of western Denmark. So right now I'm shooting straight into the sun. I have the sea mark very close to the sun, and yeah, I really have to bracket this one, and that got me thinking that from time to time I still hear people say that HDR photography is bad, or yeah, have a lot of negative things to say about it, and I think it's because they're associated with this gritty kind of editing. But HDR photography just stands for high dynamic range, and right now I am definitely in a high dynamic range scene, shooting straight into the sun. Everything here around it is just dark if I expose for the sun. So to get details in both the shadows and the highlights, I will need to bracket this photo, make an HDR photo, simply just to catch all the information. And I do that by bracketing the photo. So I take multiple photos at different exposures, and then I put them all together in editing, either as an HDR file or blend them together with luminosity masking. And yeah, that is HDR photography. It doesn't mean that you have to edit in the good old-fashioned photomatics way. HDR photography is simply just a way to capture details in the shadows and in the highlights, and you can make soft and beautiful photos as much as you can make gritty, crazy editing. Yeah, so this is definitely not my proudest moment of landscape photography, because I really do not like this photo at all. It's too messy, the sea mark is too small, the sunburst takes all the attention, and the colors are questionable. Even with how I edit my photos these days, this scene just didn't really work. However, it is light years better than a good old gritty HDR edit, and I would not have been able to capture the entire dynamic range without making some form of HDR blend. I did get a few other side-lit photos from this location, which makes a whole lot more sense, both compositionally and lighting-wise. If you struggle with composition in landscape photography, be sure to get my ebook and the follow-up. They are designed to be easy to read and have loads of examples. You can get both of them via the links in the description of this video. So there are quite a lot of forests in Thy, and this is not one of them because I completely forgot to record one of the myths when I was on that tour. So here it comes. So a thing I heard a few times when I started out in landscape photography, and I rarely hear it now, but it's still out there. But when I started out, I heard that if your photos are just good enough, they will sell themselves. That's not how it works. You can take the best photos in the world, But if you haven't learned business skills or how to present them or how to like get them out there, they're not going to sell themselves. Like if I hadn't had made this YouTube channel or had my Instagram, then there's no chance that I would sell any prints whatsoever. I'm not selling a whole lot of prints, but it's basically the same with my eBooks. It seems like people really do appreciate them and really like them. But if I didn't have any channels where I could promote them through, then I wouldn't sell them. And it's the same with photos, and it's the same with video. Like when you go browse through YouTube, these videos here from Denmark, they're not the ones that stand out the most. And I'm in competition with PewDiePie and a lot of the other big YouTubers. So I need to figure out a way to deliver these videos for you to see them. Just because I put a lot of effort and a whole lot of time into them, this video is becoming really long by now. They don't sell themselves. People don't know what they're gonna get before they've actually watched it through. So the thing that this video is going to be so long is definitely something that works against it. So no, photos don't sell themselves. There's a whole lot of other things you need to know if you want to create a landscape photography business. So I've come out to another lighthouse in this series called Lodbjerg fjord, and it's quite an aesthetic little lighthouse because you can just see it pop up over the forest. Like we have the ocean here behind me, and then we have like the forest straight in front here, and there's not really a whole lot to it. Compositionally, I try to put the lighthouse where there's the least amount of forest or where the tall trees can like frame it. And I am going to go a little bit further out just to get a little bit more of a perspective compression. I'm going to put on the long lens. I think that will work the best just for this minimalist photo. The sun is coming down. I'm going to get side light, and I'm going to put on the polarizing filter because side light plus polarizing filter makes a dark background. So shooting first here at this little dune here, and then I will move further back, and that is it. So another myth within photography is that it is very technical. In all honesty, you do not need to know the formula for f-stops and t-stops and how ISO works within the camera and what the highest possible noise is and ISO invariance and so forth. Like, you really do not need to know all those things to take amazing photos. Some photographers like to geek out about it. Fair enough, I have no issue with that, but just know that you absolutely do not need to be a technical genius to use a camera and take beautiful photos. A lot of really great photographers are shooting in program mode all the time. Denmark is a country of islands, fjords, small seas and an occasional large stream. This made it very easy for the Vikings to get around the geographical area we today know as Denmark, as all this water basically were the highways of the past. In the Limfjord there are several smaller and larger islands. Many of them are connected to the mainland with bridges, while you need to take the ferry to get to the others. One of the islands is named Fjord, and it has been a place I've wanted to visit for a very long time. Fjord is known for the Fjord Formation, which is a marine geological formation about 55 million years old. So approximately 10 million years younger than the extinction event of the dinosaurs. Plus minus a few million years. I specifically wanted to photograph the diatomite cliffs, which is known as Moler in Danish. These cliffs is on the Danish list of tentative candidates for World Heritage and may become a World Heritage Site. This specific location is located on the northwestern point of Fjord, and it does require a little walk of about a kilometer to reach. You can park at the famous local brewery, and from there it is just about following the signs. Once you get to the cliffs, just follow the ridge towards west until you reach a small path where you can get down to the beach. From there are only a few hundred meters to the cliffs in eastern direction. So I've come down here to Knudeklinterne on Fjord, and I think they look super cool. I really like the color, and I really like those lines that you see in the ridges here. So yeah, I'm looking forward to photographing this. So another myth that I hear from time to time is that everything has already been photographed. And yes, even this place that you probably have never seen before has of course been photographed before, but not by me. And you go and photograph for yourself, for your own enjoyment. It's like you go and fish. People are also fishing, but it's still fun to do it. And I don't think that a lot of professional photographers, at least not photographers on social media, has been here before. I haven't seen a whole lot of photos from here, and especially not like, long exposed seascape photos. So that is definitely what I'm going to do here. Like, it's not super hard to get something that I consider original, or at least something that I haven't seen before from this location. It's the first time I'm here, so yeah, I'm just looking super much forward to photograph it. So I've just been back here behind me and taking some photos of the first ridge, and now I'm just moving around, and this place is quite fascinating. You can really see the erosion going on, how the trees are falling down. Really nice. So as per usual, I find myself in peculiar situations. So right now I'm out in the water and shooting towards land, and I'm balancing on a couple of stones so that the waves won't get up into my wellies. The idea is pretty simple. Simply just use the waves when they come in and make their streaks, and then I can photograph up towards this ridge thingy here. And now the sun is coming out again, lighting up the scene, and yeah, I'll try to get the shot. Looking at this photo, I actually do not think that this light benefits the subject. The cliffs are special due to the lines going through them, and the strong orange side light actually ends up being distracting. Sadly, the composition is also a little bit awkward, and I didn't notice that on location due to the peculiar angle I was photographing in. If just the Sony A7R series had a fully articulating screen. Even a black and white conversion doesn't really do the trick in regard to the light. Luckily, I also took some shots while the sun were behind the cloud, and it gives a much more even light that really makes the line stand out. I think this location would likely work better on a cloudy day with some texture in the clouds. And speaking of light. So another myth I often hear is that sunset and sunrise is the best for landscape photography. It gives the best light. Yes, it gives good light. I enjoy photographing in sunsets and sunrises. However, right now we are moving in to the blue hour, and you can probably not see it here, but I'm getting some beautiful, well, kind of reflected light from the sunset up in the sky, which is thrown on to the cliffs, ridges here in the background. And then I have a beautiful bluish pinkish sky behind it. Also very beautiful light. Generally, when it comes to the weather and weather conditions, what I try not to photograph in is just harsh daylight and overcast weather with a lot of specular highlights and highlights in the clouds. Completely overcast weather can definitely be really good for landscape photography. And yeah, I, as you probably know by now, really enjoy photographing in really hard conditions, like weather-wise, storms and wind and stuff, especially around water and seascapes. So sunset and sunrise delivers good light, but it is not necessarily the best for landscape photography. I do think this final blue hour photo ends up being my favorite from Knudeklinterne on Fjord. The colors and the light is nice and soft, and I prefer this composition to the triangular one. The triangular scene has great potential with a slightly other composition and conditions. Knudeklinterne is definitely a location I will return to in the future. I get a lot of experience from photographing it and already now have many other ideas of how to approach it next time. If you want to learn about composition in landscape photography and how I edit my photos, there are links to my eBOOKs and Photoshop for Landscape Photographers course down in the description, along with a coupon code to save some money. The Limfjord and Thy National Park are both massive areas. Even though this is one of the longest videos I've ever made, I hardly even scratched the surface. However, I do hope I gave a small glimpse into the possibilities for landscape photography in these areas. If you know of any other myths in landscape photography, feel free to share them in the comments. And if you want to follow along on this series, which I promise will have shorter episodes in the future, be sure to subscribe to the channel. As always, I'd highly appreciate a like, and be sure to check out the other episodes and links in the description.